If you want to know why your gut feels off, the bloating that shows up out of nowhere, the energy crashes after meals, the irregular digestion that no probiotic capsule seems to fix, don't start with what you're eating. Don't start with stress. Start with the condition of the single cell layer lining your intestines and the bacteria that are either feeding it or eroding it every single day. Here's what most people never hear from their doctor. After 50, the lining of your gut, that delicate one-cell thick barrier separating the inside of your body from everything passing through your digestive tract, begins to thin and develop microscopic gaps. At the same time, the protective bacteria that produce the chemicals that rebuild that lining begin to decline, while opportunistic, inflammation-driving bacteria quietly expand their territory. This is the silent biology behind what most people simply call getting older. But there is one seed, ancient, inexpensive, and almost completely forgotten in Western kitchens, that has been shown in peer-reviewed research to do two things at once. It feeds the exact bacteria that rebuild your gut wall, and it physically starves the harmful bacteria that erode it. 1 spoon a day. That is the dose. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly how to use it. Most people believe gut health is about adding probiotics. Take the capsule, eat the yogurt, hope for the best. But after nearly 15 years working in emergency medicine and preventive care, I have watched something quietly contradict that approach. Patients who take probiotic after probiotic and still struggle with digestion, inflammation, and that vague, persistent feeling of internal disturbance. The reason is not that probiotics do not work. It is that you cannot populate a damaged garden with seeds if the soil itself is depleted. Your gut bacteria need a specific kind of fiber, a particular molecular structure, to actually take hold, multiply, and start producing the compounds that repair your intestinal wall. That structure is rare in Western diets. It is abundant in this one seed. Hi, I'm Dr. Lina. I'm an emergency medicine physician with nearly 15 years in clinical and preventive care. And over the last decade, I have been deeply focused on the relationship between food compounds and the cellular machinery that keeps us functioning into our 60s, 70s, and beyond. The research on this particular seed surprised me when I first encountered it, because the effect sizes published in the peer-reviewed literature were larger than what I'd expect from most pharmaceutical interventions for gut health. And they were happening with a food you can buy for under $5 at any Indian or Asian grocery. In this video, I am going to walk you through why your gut wall thins after 50 and the specific cellular mechanism that drives bloating, sensitivity, and inflammation. The forgotten seed that contains a rare polysaccharide mucilage shown in laboratory studies to dramatically increase populations of the bacteria that repair your gut lining. 3 precise biological pathways through which this seed simultaneously rebuilds gut cells and starves harmful bacteria. The exact morning protocol, dose, soaking method, and timing that activates these effects. The 4 mistakes that completely cancel out the benefits, even when people are eating the seed daily. And the simple, trackable marker you can use at home to know whether the protocol is actually working in your body. Quick favor before we go deeper. I see messages from people who have watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you check right now? It takes 2 seconds, it is free, and it helps this channel reach more people who deserve real, science-backed health information instead of headlines. Let me give you a framework before we get to the seed itself, because without it, the research will not make complete sense. Picture your intestinal lining as the inner wall of a vast, narrow tunnel running through the center of your body. That wall is just 1 cell thick. 1. Thinner than a sheet of tissue paper. And it is the only thing standing between the contents of your gut, food particles, bacteria, toxins, and your bloodstream. That single layer of cells is held together by structures called tight junctions. Think of them as the mortar between bricks. When the mortar is fresh and properly laid, the wall is impenetrable to anything that should not pass through. But when the mortar starts to crumble, microscopic gaps open. Particles that should never enter your bloodstream begin to slip through, triggering immune responses, low-grade inflammation, and the cascade of symptoms most people are told to simply live with. Researchers call this increased intestinal permeability. Most people call it leaky gut. The names matter less than the biology, and the biology is well documented. Now, here is the part nobody talks about. Those gut wall cells, the enterocytes, replace themselves completely every 3 to 5 days. Your entire intestinal lining is rebuilt nearly every week. But that rebuilding process requires fuel, a very specific fuel called butyrate, a short-chain fatty acid produced exclusively by certain beneficial bacteria when they ferment specific types of fiber. Butyrate is to your gut wall what concrete is to a foundation. Without it, the rebuilding fails. The wall stays thin, the mortar stays crumbled. And here is where the forgotten seed enters the picture. The seed is basil seed. In India and Southeast Asia, it is called sabja. Botanically, it is Ocimum basilicum, the seed of sweet basil. Most Westerners walk right past it. Some confuse it with chia seeds because of the similar gel-forming behavior, but the molecular structure of the mucilage is different, and that difference is the entire reason it works the way it does for gut repair specifically. When basil seeds hit water, they swell into a translucent gel. That gel is not just texture, it is a complex polysaccharide mucilage, a long-chain carbohydrate structure that human digestive enzymes cannot break down. It travels intact through your stomach, past your small intestine, and arrives in your colon where your beneficial bacteria treat it as a feast. And what they produce in return is butyrate, the exact compound your gut wall cells need to rebuild themselves. Let me walk you through the 3 specific mechanisms because understanding them is what allows you to use this food strategically rather than randomly. Mechanism 1. Selective bacterial feeding and the starvation of harmful strains. The polysaccharide mucilage in basil seeds is what researchers call a selective prebiotic. Not all gut bacteria can ferment it. The beneficial strains, particularly Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium species, are equipped with the specific enzymes needed to break it down. Harmful, inflammation-driving strains lack those enzymes. So when you consume basil seed mucilage daily, you are essentially providing food to one side of an ongoing competition between bacterial populations and starving the other. Studies on basil seed polysaccharides have shown measurable increases in beneficial bacterial populations within 2 to 3 weeks. Think of it as a selective fertilizer that feeds the flowers and leaves the weeds without water. Over time, the bacterial composition of your entire colon shifts. Mechanism 2. Butyrate production and tight junction repair. Once the beneficial bacteria ferment the basil seed mucilage, they produce short-chain fatty acids, predominantly butyrate, propionate, and acetate. Butyrate is the critical one for gut wall repair. It is the preferred energy source for the enterocytes, those cells lining your intestine, providing up to 70% of their energy needs. When butyrate is abundant, those cells multiply faster, the tight junctions between them strengthen, and the wall becomes measurably less permeable. Research has demonstrated that increased butyrate production correlates directly with improved gut barrier function, reduced systemic inflammation markers like C-reactive protein, and lower circulating endotoxin levels. The crumbled mortar gets repaired. The wall holds. And critically, this is not theoretical. It is measurable in stool samples and blood inflammatory panels. Mechanism 3. Mucin layer reinforcement and the physical barrier upgrade. Above the cellular wall, there is a thick protective layer called the mucus layer, made of glycoproteins called mucins. This is your first line of defense. It is where harmful bacteria are trapped before they can even reach the cell wall. As we age, this mucus layer thins, leaving the underlying cells exposed. The polysaccharides in basil seeds have been shown to stimulate the production of mucin 2, the primary structural protein of this protective coat. You are not just rebuilding the wall behind it, you are restoring the protective barrier in front of it. 2 layers of defense, both reinforced by 1 daily spoon. Add to that a documented suppression of the NF-κB inflammatory pathway, and you have a food that calms the chronic, low-grade inflammation driving most age-related gut symptoms in the first place. Now let me give you the research, because this is not folklore. A study published in the Emirates Journal of Food and Agriculture examined the prebiotic potential of hydrated basil seeds after in vitro gastrointestinal digestion. Researchers found that basil seed mucilage significantly increased the populations of Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium strains while suppressing the growth of opportunistic Enterobacteriaceae. The selectivity was striking. Not just more good bacteria, but specifically less of the harmful kind, in the same culture at the same time, fed only by the addition of basil seed mucilage. A 2023 study in the Journal of Functional Foods evaluated Ocimum basilicum mucilage in animal models of high-fat diet-induced gut dysbiosis. After 8 weeks of supplementation, the basil seed group showed restoration of the bacteroidetes to firmicutes ratio toward a healthy lean profile, alongside significant reductions in plasma lipid markers and measurable improvements in gut microbiota diversity. The mucilage was identified as a functional prebiotic for both metabolic and gut barrier health. Research published in the journal Foods analyzing basil seeds as a novel functional ingredient documented that basil seed polysaccharides protect the intestinal epithelial barrier through multiple mechanisms, including upregulation of tight junction proteins like occludin and claudin 1 and stimulation of mucin 2 expression in goblet cells. These are the structural molecules that determine whether your gut wall holds together or leaks. They were measurably increased. A separate line of research on the anti-inflammatory effects of basil seeds documented suppression of the NF-κB inflammatory pathway, the same master switch that drives chronic low-grade gut inflammation. Reductions in pro-inflammatory cytokines, including IL-6 and TNF-alpha, were observed in cellular and animal models. And a comparative analysis of seed mucilages from chia, basil, fenugreek, mustard, and flaxseed found that basil seed mucilage produced one of the highest levels of short-chain fatty acid output during colonic fermentation. These are not small effects. These are the kinds of biological shifts that pharmaceutical companies spend years trying to replicate in a pill, and basil seeds deliver them through a single tablespoon of food. Here is the exact protocol, with every detail mattering for a reason. Step 1. Take 1 tablespoon of whole basil seeds, approximately 10 to 12 grams. This is the dose that aligns with the prebiotic research. More is not better. The mucilage is potent, and exceeding 2 tablespoons daily can produce digestive heaviness as your gut bacteria adjust to the new fuel supply. Step 2. Soak the seeds in 8 ounces, roughly 240 milliliters of room temperature water for 15 to 20 minutes. The seeds will swell to roughly 30 times their dry size, forming the translucent mucilage gel. This step is non-negotiable. Eating dry basil seeds means the mucilage forms inside your stomach, drawing water away from your tissues and producing discomfort. Soaked seeds arrive in your colon already hydrated, ready to feed your bacteria from the moment they arrive. Step 3. Consume the soaked seeds first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, ideally within 30 minutes of waking. Fasted state consumption allows the mucilage to coat the intestinal lining without competing with food particles. And the morning circadian window is when your gut barrier proteins are most actively expressed. Drink the gel directly, or stir it into a glass of warm lemon water. The lemon adds a small amount of vitamin C that supports collagen production in the gut wall itself. Step 4. Wait at least 30 minutes before eating breakfast. This gives the mucilage time to begin its work undisturbed. During this window, you can have warm water or a small amount of unsweetened green tea brewed at 175 degrees Fahrenheit. Do not add dairy milk. The casein proteins in dairy bind to polyphenols and reduce their bioactivity, and some of basil seed's secondary compounds belong to that polyphenol family. Step 5. Pair this protocol with one anchor food daily that supports the same pathway. The strongest pairings, based on the synergy literature, are a small handful of walnuts for omega-3 support of the gut wall lipid membranes, half a cup of cooked lentils a few times per week for additional resistant starch and folate, and 1 serving of fermented foods such as unpasteurized sauerkraut, kimchi, or unsweetened plain kefir. The basil seeds feed your bacteria. The fermented food delivers more of them. The combination is far more powerful than either alone. Now, here are the clinical pro tips I share with patients who want this to actually work. First, consistency is the variable, not intensity. The studies showing meaningful changes in bacterial populations and gut barrier markers ran for 6 to 12 weeks. Your gut wall replaces itself every 3 to 5 days, but the bacterial population shift that drives that rebuilding is cumulative. Doing this 5 days a week and skipping weekends produces roughly half the benefit, not because of the missed days, but because the bacterial signaling needs sustained input. Second, track the right marker. Most people focus on whether they feel different. The biology happens before the feeling. If you have access, ask your doctor for a high-sensitivity C-reactive protein test before starting and again at 12 weeks. A measurable drop is your evidence the gut barrier is healing. Without lab access, track stool consistency, frequency, and the absence of bloating after meals. These are real, daily indicators that respond to the protocol within weeks. Third, store your seeds correctly. Basil seeds are shelf-stable for months in an airtight container away from light and heat. Avoid pre-soaked basil seed drinks sold commercially, as most contain added sugar that feeds the exact harmful bacteria you are trying to starve. Whole, dry, raw seeds soaked at home is the only form that delivers the full prebiotic effect. Fourth, hydrate appropriately. The mucilage absorbs significant water in your gut. Drink at least 8 additional ounces of water within the hour after consuming the seeds. Without adequate hydration, the soluble fiber can produce constipation rather than relieve it, the opposite of what you want. Fifth, give your microbiome time to adjust. In the first 3 to 5 days, some people notice mild gas or a feeling of fullness as their bacterial populations shift. This is normal and resolves within a week. Push through it. The discomfort is your gut bacteria reorganizing, not a sign the protocol is failing. Now let me address the 4 mistakes that silently neutralize this entire approach. Mistake 1. Eating the seeds dry or sprinkling them on food without soaking. Dry basil seeds absorb water in your stomach, drawing fluid away from your tissues and arriving in your colon partially hydrated rather than fully gelled. The prebiotic effect is significantly reduced. Always soak. 15 minutes minimum. Mistake 2. Combining them with a high-sugar breakfast. The acute glucose spike from refined carbohydrates triggers an inflammatory response in the gut wall and feeds the exact harmful bacteria that the basil seeds are working to starve. You are working against yourself. Pair the seeds with protein, healthy fat, and fiber-rich foods. Eggs. Plain unsweetened yogurt, oats, vegetables. Not cereal, not pastry, not fruit juice. Mistake 3. Using basil seed extract supplements instead of whole soaked seeds. The mucilage structure is mechanically essential. It is not the active compound in isolation, but the gel-forming polysaccharide network that delivers the prebiotic effect. Capsules cannot replicate this. Whole seeds, soaked in water. That is the form the research validates. Mistake 4. Quitting at week 2. The gut barrier rebuilding process is real and measurable, but it operates on a 6 to 12-week timeline, not a 48-hour timeline. Most people give up exactly when the underlying biology is starting to shift. Commit to 90 days before evaluating anything. The patients I have watched transform their gut health did not feel a dramatic change in week 1. They felt it at week 8, and again at week 16, and again at month 6. Let me bring it all together. Your intestinal wall is 1 cell thick and rebuilds itself every 3 to 5 days, but the rebuilding requires butyrate, produced by beneficial bacteria fermenting specific fibers most Western diets lack. Basil seeds, sabja, Ocimum basilicum, contain a rare polysaccharide mucilage that selectively feeds Lactobacillus and Bifidobacterium populations while starving harmful Enterobacteriaceae strains. The three mechanisms are selective bacterial feeding, butyrate-driven tight junction repair, and mucin two-layer reinforcement. The protocol is 1 tablespoon of whole basil seeds, soaked 15 to 20 minutes in 8 ounces of water, consumed first thing in the morning on an empty stomach, paired with daily walnuts, lentils, and unpasteurized fermented foods. Avoid dry consumption, high-sugar breakfasts, supplement extracts, and quitting before 12 weeks. Track high-sensitivity carb, stool consistency, and post-meal bloating as your real indicators. Your health is not predetermined by your age or your past. It is shaped every single day by the inputs you give the biological systems already inside you. You have far more control over your gut than anyone has told you. If this information gave you something you can actually act on tomorrow morning, please do 2 things for me. First, share this video with someone you care about. A parent, a sibling, a friend over 50 who has been struggling with gut issues and told it is just part of getting older. They deserve to know there is a specific, food-based, evidence-supported path forward, and the cost of trying it is the price of a small bag of seeds. Second, subscribe to this channel and hit the like button if you have not already. It tells the algorithm this content is worth showing to more people, and it directly helps me keep producing real, science-based videos instead of recycled headlines. I'll see you in the next one. Dr. Lina out.